Have you ever felt so humiliated that the only thing you wanted was to vanish into the night? That was exactly how Lady Elena Vane felt. In 1814, beneath the glittering chandeliers of London's most ruthless social season, she was publicly shattered by the man she loved. Blinded by tears, she ran from the ballroom, desperate for escape, only to collide with a man known as the Ice King. What happens when a broken heart crashes into a frozen one? It wasn't just a scandal. It was the beginning of a dangerous game of vengeance, secrets, and a love that could burn England to the ground. The year was 1814, and London was suffocating under a blanket of fog and gossip. In the high-stakes world of the ton, reputation was currency, and Lady Elena Vane had just been declared bankrupt. Elena was not the diamond of the season. She was the quiet, dutiful daughter of the Earl of Hemsley, a man whose gambling debts were the worst-kept secret in Mayfair. Elena had one hope to save her family from ruin: an engagement to Lord Thomas Blackwood. Thomas was charming, wealthy, and had been courting Elena for months, or so she thought. The setting was the Duchess of Richmond's grand ball. The air smelled of beeswax, expensive perfume, and desperation. Elena stood near a towering arrangement of white lilies, her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. Tonight was the night. Thomas had promised to make an announcement. She smoothed the skirts of her pale blue silk gown. It was 2 seasons old, retrimmed with cheap lace by her maid, Sarah, to look new. Elena hoped no one noticed the fraying hem. Across the room, Thomas caught her eye. He smiled, that dazzling, easy smile that made Elena feel safe. He raised his glass and tapped a spoon against the crystal. The room went silent. "My lords, ladies, friends." Thomas's voice boomed, full of confidence. "I have a joyous announcement to make this evening." Elena took a step forward, her breath held. This was it, the salvation of her family, the start of her life. "I am delighted to announce my betrothal," Thomas continued, his eyes sliding right past Elena, "to the beautiful, the incomparable, Miss Clementine Hightower." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Elena froze. It felt as though someone had reached into her chest and stopped her heart manually. Clementine Hightower? The wealthy heiress whose father owned half the shipping lanes in Liverpool. Clementine squealed, rushing to Thomas's side, clutching his arm. The room erupted in polite applause, but Elena heard none of it. All she heard was the rushing blood in her ears. Then she saw it. Thomas looked at her. He didn't look sorry. He looked relieved. He offered her a small, pitying shrug, as if to say, "It's just business, Elena." Then came the whispers. They started low, like the buzzing of wasps, before swelling into a roar. "Poor Elena Vane. Did she actually think he'd marry a pauper's daughter? Look at her dress. It's practically falling apart. She's ruined. Who would take Blackwood's cast off?" The humiliation was a physical blow. Elena's vision blurred. The glittering candlelight turned into jagged streaks of pain. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't stay. She turned and ran. "Elena, wait!" a friend called out, but Elena didn't stop. She pushed past a footman, nearly knocking over a tray of champagne. She burst through the heavy oak doors, out of the ballroom, and into the cool, dark corridor. She needed air. She needed to be anywhere but here. She sprinted toward the terrace doors, her slippers slapping against the marble floor. Tears streamed down her face, hot and angry. She yanked the terrace door open and threw herself into the night air. But she wasn't looking where she was going. She turned the corner of the stone balustrade and slammed, hard, into a wall of solid black wool. The impact knocked the wind out of her. Strong hands instantly gripped her shoulders to steady her, preventing her from tumbling down the stone steps into the garden below. "Steady," a deep voice commanded. It wasn't gentle. It was cold, authoritative, and utterly devoid of emotion. Elena gasped, looking up through her tear-filled lashes. She was staring into the chest of a man. A very tall man. Slowly she tilted her head back. Standing there, bathed in the moonlight, was the Duke of Stirling, Sebastian Thorne, known throughout England as the Ice King. He was arguably the most powerful man in the country, second only to the Prince Regent. He was also the most terrifying. Rumors swirled around him like smoke. They said he had no heart. They said he had exiled his own mother. They said he watched his first wife die and didn't shed a single tear. His eyes were gray, not the soft gray of a morning mist, but the hard, metallic gray of a sword blade. And right now those eyes were narrowing at the sobbing, disheveled woman clutching his lapels. "Your Grace," Elena stammered, horrified. She tried to pull away, but her knees buckled. He didn't let her fall. He held her upright, his grip firm but distant, as if he were holding a sack of flour rather than a human being. "Lady Elena Vane," he said. He knew her name. That terrified her more than his reputation. "You are making a scene." I am leaving," she choked out, wiping frantically at her face. "Please let me pass." "You cannot leave," Sebastian said flatly. "You are hysterical. And you are alone. If you run out into the street in this state, you will either be robbed or run over." "I don't care," Elena cried, the pain of Thomas's betrayal bubbling over into anger. "I would rather be run over than go back in there." Sebastian tilted his head, studying her. For a fleeting second, something flickered in his cold eyes. Curiosity? "Blackwood," he stated. It wasn't a question. Elena flinched. "How did you know?" "I know everything that happens in this city, Lady Elena, especially regarding men as foolish as Thomas Blackwood." He released her shoulders and took a step back, adjusting his cuffs. "He announced the Hightower girl, I assume?" Elena nodded, shame burning her cheeks. "Yes." "Predictable," Sebastian muttered. "Blackwood needs cash. Hightower has it. You do not." The bluntness of his words stung. But strangely, it was better than the fake pity everyone else offered. "Thank you for the reminder, Your Grace," she snapped, finding a sudden spark of courage. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a life to ruin." She moved to step around him, but he blocked her path again. "Marry me," he said. Elena stopped. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. She blinked, sure she had misheard him. The wind rustled the ivy on the walls, the only sound in the sudden silence. I beg your pardon." "Marry me," Sebastian repeated, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. "Tomorrow, by special license." "You must be mad," Elena whispered, backing away. "You are the Duke of Stirling. I am nobody. And why would you want to marry me? You don't even like me. You don't like anyone." "Correct," Sebastian said. "I do not require affection, Lady Elena. I require a duchess. My advisors are pestering me to produce an heir to secure the line. I need a wife who is of noble birth, who is desperate enough to accept my terms, and who understands that this will be a business arrangement. No love, no interference, just duty." He stepped closer, towering over her. "You are currently the most desperate woman in London. Blackwood has humiliated you. Your father is destitute. If you walk away now, you face poverty and ridicule. If you marry me, you gain protection, immense wealth, and the highest title in the land. You will walk back into that ballroom not as a rejected girl, but as the Duchess of Stirling. And Blackwood will have to bow to you." Elena stared at him. It was a deal with the devil. Everyone knew the stories. To marry Sebastian Thorne was to enter a cold, lonely tomb. But as she thought about Thomas's smug face and the snickers of the crowd, a fire lit in her belly. It was a dangerous fire. "And what do you get out of it, Your Grace?" she asked quietly. "Besides an heir?" Sebastian's expression darkened. I get a shield, a wife, keeps the matchmaking mothers away, and I get someone who knows what it is like to be betrayed." Elena looked at his outstretched hand. It was gloved in black leather. If she took it, her life as she knew it was over. But her life was already over. Slowly, trembling, Elena Vane reached out and placed her hand in the hand of the Ice King. "I accept." The corners of Sebastian's mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was a seal of fate. "Good," he said. "Dry your tears, Elena. We are going back inside." "Inside?" she panicked. "I can't." "You can," he said, offering her his arm, "because you are with me, and no one touches what is mine." The moment Elena took the Duke's arm, the atmosphere shifted. She felt a strange surge of power radiating from him. He didn't offer comfort. He offered armor. "Chin up," Sebastian murmured as they approached the terrace doors. "Do not look at the floor. Look at them. Make them uncomfortable." They re-entered the ballroom. Usually, a re-entrance goes unnoticed. But when the Duke of Stirling walks into a room, the air changes pressure. The chatter didn't just stop. It died. Hundreds of heads turned. Eyes widened. Fans snapped shut. There, walking arm in arm with the most feared man in England, was the girl who had fled in disgrace only 10 minutes prior. Elena felt the weight of the stairs, but Sebastian's arm was like a steel bar beneath her hand. He walked with a predator's grace, steering her directly through the parting crowd toward the center of the room, right toward Thomas and Clementine. Thomas Blackwood was laughing at something Clementine said, a glass of champagne in hand. He turned, and his smile vanished. He choked on his drink. "Your Grace," Thomas stammered, bowing low. Clementine curtsied so deep she nearly lost her balance. We didn't expect to see you this evening." Sebastian looked at Thomas with the kind of disinterest one might show a bug on a windshield. "Evidently," Sebastian drawled. "I hear congratulations are in order, Blackwood." Thomas beamed, recovering his composure. "Yes, thank you, Your Grace. It is a fine match." "I was speaking to myself," Sebastian interrupted smoothly. Thomas froze. Sorry." Sebastian turned his gaze to the crowd, raising his voice just enough to carry to the corners of the room. "Since everyone is in the mood for announcements," Sebastian said, "I thought I would join in. I am pleased to inform you all that Lady Elena Vane has just done me the great honor of accepting my proposal of marriage." The sound that ripped through the room was a collective gasp. It was louder than the music had been. Thomas's face went white. Clementine dropped her fan. Marriage?" Thomas stuttered, looking from the Duke to Elena. "But surely." "You jest, Your Grace. Elena is the future Duchess of Stirling." Sebastian cut him off, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that only Thomas and Elena could hear. "And if you ever speak her name with anything less than absolute reverence again, Blackwood, I will buy every debt you own and throw you in Fleet Prison before sunrise." Thomas shrank back, terrified. Sebastian looked down at Elena. For the audience, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, kissing her knuckles. His lips were cool, but the contact sent a shockwave through her arm. "Shall we dance, my dear?" he asked. It wasn't a request. As the orchestra hurriedly began a waltz, Sebastian swept her onto the floor. Elena moved automatically, her body remembering the steps, even while her mind reeled. "You are stiff," Sebastian critiqued as he spun her. "I am in shock," she hissed back. "You just threatened a man with prison." "I never make threats, Elena, only promises." "Is this real?" she asked, searching his eyes. "Or is this some cruel game?" "The license will be signed in the morning. The wedding will be private. You will move into Stirling House by noon." He spun her again, his hand firm on her waist. "This is your reality now. Do not disappoint me." As they danced, Elena saw the envy in the eyes of the women who had mocked her. She saw the fear in the men who had dismissed her father. She realized then that Sebastian was right. He had given her power. But later that night, As the carriage rattled toward her father's crumbling estate to break the news, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a chilling realization. She knew nothing about Sebastian Thorne. She knew the rumors. She knew about the accident at his country estate 3 years ago, where his first wife, the Duchess Isabel, had died. The coroner had ruled it a fall from the cliffs, but the whispers said she was pushed. Elena looked at the man sitting opposite her in the dark carriage. He was staring out the window, his face a mask of stone. He hadn't spoken a word since they left the ball. "Your Grace," she whispered. He didn't turn. "Go to sleep, Elena. Tomorrow is a long day." She shivered. She had escaped the fire of humiliation, yes, but she had walked straight into the ice. The wedding and the first night. The wedding was stark, a dusty church in Cheapside, far from the prying eyes of the ton. No flowers, no music, just a terrifyingly efficient vicar and 2 witnesses Sebastian had paid off. Elena wore a gray traveling dress. Sebastian wore black. When they arrived at Sterling House, a massive, imposing mansion that seemed to block out the sun, the servants were lined up in the foyer. They didn't look happy to see a new mistress. They looked nervous. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, a severe woman with tight lips, curtsied. "Welcome, Your Grace. Your chambers are prepared." "Separate chambers," Sebastian corrected immediately. Elena felt a sting of rejection, though she knew she shouldn't. "Of course," she murmured. "Dinner is at 8, Sebastian told her. "Do not be late. I detest tardiness." With that, he walked into his study and slammed the door. Elena was left standing in the vast, echoing hall of her new home. She was a duchess. She was rich, and she had never felt more alone. That night, a storm rolled over London. Thunder shook the window panes of Elena's bedroom. She couldn't sleep. She wandered into the hallway, carrying a single candle. She heard a noise, a low, agonizing sound. Like an animal in pain, it was coming from the library. Elena crept closer. The door was slightly ajar. She peered inside. Sebastian was there. He wasn't the Ice King now. He was slumped in a leather armchair, a half-empty bottle of brandy on the table. His head was in his hands, and he was shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the darkness, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Isabel. I didn't mean for it to end like that." Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The candle flickered. Sebastian's head snapped up. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild. When he saw her, the vulnerability vanished, replaced instantly by a terrifying rage. He stood up, knocking the chair over. "What are you doing?" he roared. "I heard a noise," Elena stammered, backing away. "Get out!" he screamed, hurling a glass against the wall near her head. It shattered, shards raining down on the carpet. "Get out and never enter this room without permission!" "Do you hear me?" Elena turned and ran back to her room, bolting the door. She slid down to the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs. The rumors were wrong. He wasn't an Ice King. He was a volcano waiting to erupt. And she was trapped in the house with him. But Elena Vane was not a coward. She had survived poverty. She had survived humiliation. She would survive Sebastian Thorne. She decided then and there she would uncover the truth about Isabel, even if it killed her. Life as the Duchess of Sterling was a strange paradox. Elena was surrounded by opulence. Silken gowns delivered daily, meals rich with sauces and exotic fruits, a carriage bearing the ducal crest ready at her whim, yet she had never felt more impoverished. Sterling House was a gilded cage, and Sebastian was its silent jailer. In the weeks following their hasty marriage, they lived separate lives under the same vast roof. Sebastian spent his days at Parliament or his clubs, returning late to lock himself in his study. They met only at dinner, seated at opposite ends of a mahogany table long enough to seat 30. The conversations were excruciating. "Did you enjoy your ride in the park today, Elena?" he would ask, not looking up from his soup. "Yes, Your Grace. The weather was agreeable." "Good. Tomorrow you will attend the opera. Lady Jersey has offered her box. You must be seen. Will you join me? A pause. The clink of silverware. No, I have business. There was always business. He was a machine, efficiently managing his estates, his political influence, and his wife's social calendar, all while keeping his distance. The outburst in the library was never mentioned. It hung between them like a phantom limb, a reminder of the raw wound beneath his frozen exterior. Driven by isolation and a gnawing curiosity, Elena began to explore the mansion. It was a place of shadows and secrets. Servants would stop talking when she entered a room. Mrs. Gable watched her with hawk-like eyes, always steering her away from certain corridors. "Those rooms are not in use, Your Grace," Mrs. Gable would say, her body blocking the entrance to the West Wing. "Nothing but dust and old memories." But Elena knew that's where Isabel's rooms had been. The mystery of the First Duchess consumed her. Why did Sebastian grieve so violently for a woman he supposedly cared nothing for? The Tun believed he was incapable of love. Yet she had heard his sobs. One rainy Tuesday, Sebastian left for Windsor to meet with the Prince Regent. He would be gone for 2 days. It was Elena's chance. She waited until midnight, until the house was asleep. Taking a heavy brass candelabra, she padded barefoot through the silent halls toward the West Wing. The air here was colder, musty with disuse. The door to Isabel's suite was locked, as expected. But Elena had learned something about her husband. He was meticulously organized. He kept spare keys to every room in the house in a velvet box in his dressing room. She had borrowed it hours earlier. Her hands trembled as she fitted the heavy iron key into the lock. It turned with a loud clack that echoed like a gunshot. She froze, waiting for Mrs. Gable to appear from the shadows. Silence. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was like stepping into a tomb. The furniture was draped in white sheets, looking like ghosts in the flickering candlelight. The air smelled faintly of lavender, Isabel's scent, preserved for 3 years. Everything was exactly as it must have been on the day she died. A book lay open face down on a bedside table. A silk stocking was draped over a chair. It was heartbreakingly intimate. Elena moved toward the vanity. It was covered in dust. Silver brushes, perfume bottles with evaporated contents, and a small, ornate jewelry box. She opened the box. It was empty, save for a single dried rose petal. She turned to leave, feeling a sudden wave of guilt for intruding on this shrine to a dead woman. As she turned, her foot nudged the edge of the fireplace hearth. A loose stone shifted. Elena knelt down. The stone wasn't grouted in. She pried it up with her fingernails. Beneath it was a small, hidden cavity. Inside rested a small, leather-bound journal. Her heart pounding, Elena picked it up. The leather was worn smooth. She opened to the last entry, dated 3 years ago, the day before Isabel died. The handwriting was hurried, frantic, the ink blotched in places as if by tears. "I cannot bear it another day. The guilt is eating me alive. Sebastian suspects nothing, which only makes it worse. His coldness is a mercy compared to the heat of my own shame. I must end it. I've agreed to meet him one last time at the cliffs tonight. He says he has a solution. I fear his solution is my ruin. If I do not return, know that I deserved whatever fate befell me. God forgive me." There was no name mentioned, just him. Elena stared at the words until they blurred. The official story was that Isabel had gone for a walk alone and slipped. This journal suggested a meeting. A clandestine rendezvous at the most dangerous spot on the estate. Had Sebastian found out? Had he followed her? The image of Sebastian in the library, the broken glass, the agony in his voice, suddenly took on a sinister new light. Was it grief, or was it remorse? A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside. Elena gasped, shoving the journal into the pocket of her dressing gown. She blew out her candle, plunging the room into total darkness. The doorknob turned slowly. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. The door creaked open an inch. A beam of light from a lantern sliced through the room, scanning the draped furniture. "Who is there?" a deep voice demanded. It wasn't Mrs. Gable. It was Sebastian. He had returned early. Elena didn't move. The darkness was her only shield. Sebastian took a step into the room, the lantern light illuminating his sharp features. He looked exhausted, travel-stained, his eyes scanning the shadows with predatory intensity. He knew someone was there. He could smell the extinguished candle wax. "Come out," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "before I drag you out." Elena knew when she was beaten. Shaking from head to toe, she stepped into the beam of light. Sebastian's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed into slits of pure fury. "You!" "Sebastian, I!" "Do not speak!" he snarled, crossing the room in 2 long strides. He grabbed her upper arm, his grip bruising. "How dare you! How dare you violate this room!" He dragged her out into the corridor, slamming the door shut and locking it, pocketing the key. He marched her down the hallway to his own study, thrusting her inside. He slammed the study door, the sound echoing like thunder. He didn't yell. The quiet that followed was far worse. "Explain yourself," he said, standing by the fireplace, his back to her. "I wanted to know who she was," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I live in her house. I sleep down the hall from her ghost. You mourn her with violence, yet you never speak her name. I have a right to know." He turned slowly. The look on his face chilled her to the bone. It wasn't anger anymore. It was a profound, icy emptiness. "You have no rights here other than the ones I grant you, Elena. You are my wife in name only. Do not mistake this arrangement for a marriage." He walked toward her, stopping only inches away. The heat radiating from his body was immense. "If I ever catch you in that wing again, I will send you to my estate in Scotland, and you will never see London again. Do you understand?" Tears stung her eyes, not from fear, but from frustration. He was a fortress she could not breach. "Yes, Your Grace. Get out of my sight." She fled to her room, the journal burning a hole in her pocket. She hadn't told him about it. It was her only leverage, her only clue to the real man beneath the ice. 2 days later, they hosted their first major dinner party. It was a mandatory display of marital unity for the benefit of the ton. 50 guests, including the highest-ranking peers of the realm. And, inevitably, Lord Thomas Blackwood and his fiancée, Clementine Hightower. Elena wore emerald green velvet, a color Sebastian had chosen. It brought out the fire in her hair and made her look regal, untouchable. Sebastian wore his usual severe black, a diamond stick pin, the only hint of his immense wealth. As they stood at the top of the stairs receiving guests, Sebastian placed a hand on the small of her back. It was a performance, she knew, but the warmth of his touch through the velvet was distracting. "They are all vultures," he murmured in her ear as the first guests arrived. "Do not let them see you bleed." The dinner was an ordeal of 12 courses and forced conversation. Thomas Blackwood, seated halfway down the table, was already loud with wine. He kept glancing at Elena with a mixture of resentment and assessing greed, as if re-evaluating property he had foolishly discarded. During a lull between the fish and the fowl courses, Thomas leaned forward, his voice carrying down the table. "Tell us, Duchess," Thomas sneered. "How are you finding life at Sterling House? Quite a change from your father's. Cozy accommodations, I imagine. Is it true the East Wing is entirely drafty?" The table fell silent. It was a blatant insult, reminding everyone of her poverty. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Before she could formulate a retort, Sebastian's voice cut through the silence like a whip. "The East Wing is perfectly comfortable, Blackwood," Sebastian said, not even looking up from his wine glass. "Though I suppose anything seems drafty when one is accustomed to the hot air that constantly surrounds you." A few guests choked back laughter. Thomas turned a mottled shade of purple. "I merely meant," Thomas stammered. "I know what you meant. Sebastian interrupted, raising his eyes. They were lethal. "You meant to insult my wife. I suggest you enjoy the venison, Lord Blackwood. It will be the last meal you ever eat in this house." Elena stared at Sebastian. He had defended her. Publicly, brutally, and without hesitation. A strange warmth bloomed in her chest, a confusing mix of gratitude and something else, something dangerous. Later, after the ladies withdrew to the drawing room, Clementine cornered Elena. "You think you've won, don't you?" Clementine hissed behind her fan. "Catching a duke, but everyone knows he's a monster. He killed his first wife, pushed her right off the cliffs. You'll be next." "That is a vile lie," Elena said, surprising herself with the vehemence of her defense. "Is it? Ask him why he keeps the West Wing locked. Ask him why he has nightmares." Clementine smiled cruelly. "Enjoy your title, Elena. It's all you have." The seeds of doubt, temporarily quelled by Sebastian's defense, sprouted again. When the last guest had departed, the house settled into an oppressive silence. Elena found Sebastian in the library, nursing a brandy. He looked drained. She walked in and closed the door. He looked up, wary. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you said to Thomas." He shrugged, looking away. "He is an insect. He needed swatting." "Why did you marry me, Sebastian? Really?" He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I told you, I needed an heir. I needed peace." "No," Elena said, stepping closer. The champagne had made her brave. "You needed someone who wouldn't ask questions. Someone grateful enough to stay in her corner. But I am not that person." She reached into her pocket and pulled out Isabel's journal. Sebastian froze, his eyes fixed on the small leather book. The color drained from his face, leaving him deathly pale. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I told you, I went into her room." "Give it to me." He stood up, his hand outstretched. It was trembling. "Not until you tell me the truth," Elena said, taking a step back. "Did you meet her at the cliffs that night, Sebastian? Did you kill her?" He looked as if she had struck him physically. He staggered back against the desk, clutching the edge for support. The Ice King was cracking right before her eyes. "You think I killed her?" He breathed, his voice thick with agony. "You think I hurt Isabel?" He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. It was terrifying. "You foolish girl," he whispered, looking at Elena with eyes full of ancient pain. "I didn't kill her. I loved her. More than my own life. That's why I covered up the truth." "What truth?" Sebastian looked at the floor, shameful tears pooling in his eyes. "Isabel wasn't meeting me at the cliffs that night, Elena. She was meeting her lover." Elena stood stunned. Her lover? She was going to end it with him. She wanted to confess to me, to ask my forgiveness. Sebastian's voice broke, but she never got the chance. She discovered she was with child, and she knew it wasn't mine. He looked up at Elena, the pain on his face unbearable. "She didn't fall, Elena. She jumped. She threw herself into the sea because she couldn't live with the shame." The silence in the room was deafening. The diary felt heavy in Elena's hand. The story Clementine told, the rumors the ton believed, they were all wrong. Sebastian wasn't a murderer. He was a cuckold who had protected his wife's memory at the cost of his own reputation. "Who was it?" Elena whispered, horrified. "Who was the man?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. The rage was back, but this time it wasn't directed at her. "The man you nearly married," he spat. "Thomas Blackwood." The revelation hit Elena with the force of a physical blow. She stumbled back, clutching a chair for support. Thomas with his easy smiles and empty promises. The man who had humiliated her for money had also destroyed Sebastian's life. He had seduced Isabel, impregnated her, and driven her to suicide, all while playing the charming bachelor in society. And Sebastian had borne it all in silence. He had let the world call him a murderer rather than let them call Isabel an adulteress. "Oh my God," Elena breathed. All her anger toward Sebastian evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming wave of empathy and horror. "Sebastian, I am so sorry." He turned away from her, leaning his forehead against the cool marble of the mantelpiece. His shoulders were shaking. The indomitable Duke of Stirling was weeping. It was a sight no one was meant to see. It was raw, ugly, human grief. Without thinking, Elena crossed the room. She didn't know what she was doing. This was the Ice King, the man who flinched from human contact. But he wasn't ice right now. He was just a man in unbearable pain. She reached out and tentatively placed a hand on his back. He tensed, and she expected him to violently shake her off. But he didn't. He remained frozen, his breath hitching. Slowly, she moved closer, wrapping her arms around his rigid torso, resting her cheek against his back. She could feel the heat of his skin through his shirt, the frantic thudding of his heart. "It wasn't your fault," she whispered fiercely into his shirt. "None of it was your fault." He let out a ragged gasp and turned within her embrace. His arms went around her, not gently, but desperately, like a drowning man clutching driftwood. He buried his face in the curve of her neck, his tears hot against her skin. They stood there for a long time, in the dying light of the library fire. The barriers between them, rank, money, secrets, had been washed away by the truth. For the first time since she had crashed into him on that terrace, Elena didn't feel afraid. She felt needed. Eventually his grip loosened. He pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes were red, his usual perfect composure shattered. He looked younger, vulnerable. He lifted a hand and gently touched her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline. It was the first time he had touched her with anything akin to tenderness. "You should not have seen this," he said, his voice rough. "I'm glad I did," Elena replied softly. "I would rather know the truth than live with the lies." He searched her face, as if looking for repulsion, but found only compassion. A strange expression crossed his face, something like wonder. "You are a singular woman, Elena Vane," he murmured. The air between them changed. The grief was still there, but something else was threading through it. An intense awareness of their proximity. His scent, sandalwood and brandy, filled her senses. He leaned in slowly, giving her ample time to pull away. She didn't. His lips brushed hers. It wasn't a demanding kiss, nor was it tentative. It was a question, a testing of new ground. Elena kissed him back. The kiss deepened, igniting a fire that had been smoldering since their first collision. It was desperate and messy, fueled by months of repressed emotion and the sudden, shocking intimacy of shared trauma. He pulled back, breathing heavily, his forehead resting against hers. "I cannot promise you love, Elena. That part of me died with her." "I don't need promises, Sebastian," she whispered. "I just need you to be real." That night, Sebastian did not go to his own chambers. He came to hers. Their union was not soft romance. It was a collision of two lonely souls seeking solace, a frantic affirmation of life in a house haunted by death. In the darkness, the Ice King burned, and Elena finally felt like a wife, not just a strategic acquisition. The next morning, the atmosphere in Stirling House had shifted. The shadows seemed less deep. The servants noticed the change immediately. The Duke ordered breakfast in the small morning room with Her Grace, rather than alone in his study. They sat together, the silence companionable rather than strained. Sebastian looked tired, but the frantic edge was gone from his eyes. "What do we do about Blackwood?" Elena asked, setting down her teacup. The thought of that man walking free, knowing what he had done, made her sick. Sebastian's expression hardened instantly. The ice returned, but this time Elena knew it wasn't directed at her. "We do nothing yet," he said. "He does not know I know the full truth. He thinks Isabel took her secret to the grave. If I move against him now without proof, it will only resurrect the scandal and drag Isabel's name through the mud. I won't do that. But he deserves to pay. He will pay." Sebastian promised darkly. "When the time is right, I will utterly destroy him. But it must be surgical." Just then, Jenkins, the butler, entered carrying a silver salver with the Morning Post. "For your grace," Jenkins said, presenting a single letter to Sebastian. It was a plain envelope, cheap paper. No return address. Sebastian took it, slicing it open with a silver knife. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. Elena watched as he read it. All the color that had returned to his face drained away in an instant. His hand clenched around the paper, crumbling it. "Sebastian?" Elena asked, alarmed. "What is it?" He looked up, and the terror in his eyes was unlike anything she had seen before. It wasn't grief or rage. It was pure fear. "Someone knows," he whispered hoarsely. "Knows what?" He flattened the crumpled note on the table and pushed it toward her. It was written in crude, block letters cut from newspapers. "I know the truth about the Duchess and the Cliffs. I know about the bastard child. Pay me £10,000 by Friday, or all of London will know too." Elena stared at the note in horror. Sebastian hadn't been the only one keeping secrets. Someone else knew what happened that night. And now, the real nightmare was just beginning. The walls of Sterling House were closing in again, but this time, Elena was trapped inside with him. The arrival of the blackmail note shattered the fragile peace that had settled over Sterling House. The warmth of the previous night evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard terror. £10,000 was a king's ransom. Sebastian stared at the crude letters, his jaw working. The vulnerable man from the library was gone. In his place sat the Ice King, his eyes like frozen steel. "No one knew," Sebastian said, his voice a low rumble. "Only I knew the contents of that note she left." "Isabel's maid," Elena said suddenly. Her mind was racing, connecting dots born of her own experience with servants who saw everything. "Where is she?" Sebastian frowned. "Molly?" "I dismissed her immediately after the funeral. Provided her with a generous severance and a recommendation for a post in Yorkshire. I wanted everyone associated with that time out of the house." "Did you verify she went to Yorkshire?" Sebastian's silence was answer enough. In his grief and haste to bury the past, he had been careless. "If she stayed in London," Elena pressed, "and ran through the money." "Desperation makes people bold." Sebastian finished. He stood up, crumpled the note in his fist, and threw it into the fireplace. He watched it burn with a terrifying intensity. "We will not pay. If we pay once, we will pay forever." "What do we do?" He turned to her. "Not we, Elena. I. This is my mess. I will clean it up. You will stay here, attend your fittings, receive callers, and act as though your only concern is the next ball." "Absolutely not." Elena stood up, meeting his gaze fiercely. "I told you last night, Sebastian, I am not staying in the corner. You married me to be a partner. Use me." He looked ready to argue, to command her back into line. But as he looked at her, chin lifted, eyes defiant, he saw the same steel that had allowed her to survive her own public humiliation. "Very well," he conceded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "But you do exactly as I say. This is not a drawing-room game. These are the shadows of London, and they bite." The hunt began. Sebastian unleashed his network of spies. Men who usually tracked political dissidents or French sympathizers were now tasked with finding a former lady's maid in the sprawling rookeries of London. For 3 days, the tension in Sterling House was excruciating. Elena played her part perfectly during the day, sipping tea with gossiping dowagers, while Sebastian worked in the shadows. They met late at night in the library, strategizing in hushed tones. On the 4th evening, Jenkins delivered a simple, folded paper to Sebastian in the study. Sebastian read it, stood up, and reached for his heaviest cloak. "They found her," he said to Elena, who was anxiously pacing by the window. "She's in St. Giles, in a gin shop." St. Giles. The worst slum in London. A place where carriages did not go and guards feared to tread. "I'm coming with you," Elena said, already moving toward the door. "Elena, no. It is dangerous. Disease, thieves, cutthroats." She was Isabel's maid. "She might talk to another woman. She will only fear you, and fear might make her stupid." Sebastian ground his teeth, but he knew she was right. "Wear your darkest cloak. Pull the hood up. Do not speak unless I tell you to, and stay behind me." They took a hackney carriage to the edge of the slum, then walked. The fog was thick here, smelling of coal smoke, unwashed bodies, and cheap gin. The gas lamps were few and far between, casting long, twitching shadows. They located the gin shop, a hovel that reeked of misery. Sebastian pushed the door open. The noise inside died instantly at the sight of a towering man in fine wool and a hooded woman. Sebastian located Molly in a corner booth, nursing a pewter mug. She looked dreadful, thin, pale, her eyes glassy with drink. She was wearing a faded silk shawl that Elena recognized instantly. It had belonged to Isabel. When Molly saw Sebastian, she screamed and tried to scramble under the table. Sebastian moved with lightning speed, blocking her exit. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, an immovable wall of judgment. "The note," Sebastian said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the smoky room like a knife. "Did you send it?" Molly began to sob hysterically. "I'm starving, Your Grace. The money ran out. My new master let me go. I had nowhere else." "So you decided to sell my wife's memory?" "I knew you'd pay. Everyone says you have ice in your veins, that you cared nothing for her. But I saw you. I saw how you broke when you found her." Elena stepped forward from behind Sebastian, lowering her hood. Molly gasped. "You," Molly whispered. "The new Duchess." "Molly," Elena said gently, "tell the truth. You found the note Isabel left, didn't you, before the Duke did?" Molly nodded frantically. "I was tidying her room while she was on her walk. I saw it on the vanity. I read it. Then they brought her body back." Sebastian leaned in closer. "Who else have you told?" "No one. I swear on my mother's grave. I just wanted enough money to get back to the country." Sebastian studied her. He seemed to be weighing her soul. "If I find out you have spoken a word of this to anyone else, there is no corner of England dark enough to hide you. Do you understand?" Molly sobbed her agreement. "You will leave London tonight," Sebastian commanded. He pulled a heavy leather pouch of coins from his coat and dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "This is more than you asked for. Go to Liverpool. Take a ship to America. Never return." Molly grabbed the pouch, kissing his gloved hand repeatedly. "Thank you, Your Grace. Oh, thank you." As she scrambled up to leave, she paused, looking from Sebastian to Elena. The gin seemed to loose her tongue one last time. "She wasn't alone, you know," Molly whispered, her eyes wide. Sebastian froze. "What?" "That afternoon, before she went to the cliffs. She wasn't alone in the West Wing. I heard arguing. A man's voice." "Who?" Sebastian demanded, his hands clenching. "I didn't see his face, Your Grace. He left by the garden door. But I heard him shouting. He was angry she was going to tell you the truth. He said if she ruined him, he'd make sure she never spoke again." Molly fled into the night, leaving Sebastian and Elena standing in the sordid gin shop, stunned. Isabel hadn't just committed suicide out of shame. She had been driven to it, perhaps even threatened, hours before her death. Sebastian looked at Elena. The gray of his eyes had turned black. The thaw was over. A new, deadlier freeze had set in. "It wasn't enough that he destroyed our marriage," Sebastian murmured, his voice vibrating with a lethal rage. "He hounded her to her death." "Thomas," Elena whispered, shivering though the room was hot. "We are done waiting," Sebastian said, taking her arm to lead her out of the slum. It is time for Lord Blackwood to face the Ice King. The night of the inaugural ball arrived, transforming Stirling House into a fortress of white roses. Elena stood at the top of the grand staircase, a vision in shimmering silver cloth that made her look like moonlight brought to life. Beside her, Sebastian was a shadow in severe black velvet, his eyes scanning the crowd with predatory focus. Thomas Blackwood arrived with Clementine Hightower on his arm, dripping in diamonds that Elena now knew were bought on credit. Thomas bowed, his eyes lingering on Elena with greedy regret, but his arrogance remained intact. A magnificent gathering. Thomas smirked. Sebastian smiled back. It was a shark smile. We have a special surprise for later. At midnight, the music died. Sebastian stepped to the center of the dance floor. He didn't need to tap a glass. His presence commanded absolute silence. "My lords, ladies," Sebastian's voice boomed, "I wish to address a matter of business. The stability of our society relies on honorable men. Unfortunately, there are some among us who finance their lavish lifestyles with promises they cannot keep." He locked eyes with Thomas, who stood near the champagne fountain, looking uneasy. "As of this afternoon," Sebastian announced, "I have acquired every mortgage and debt owed by the Earl of Hemsley." The crowd gasped. Elena's father was safe. "And," Sebastian's voice dropped to a lethal low, "every single note owed by Lord Thomas Blackwood." Thomas went white. "This is preposterous," he sputtered. "It is done," Sebastian countered coldly. "You are ruined, Thomas. The sum exceeds the value of your estates. Even Miss Hightower's dowry would not cover half of it." Clementine yanked her arm away from Thomas as if he were on fire, stepping back in horror. Sebastian walked slowly toward the terrifyingly pale man. The crowd parted. He stopped inches away, leaning in so only Thomas and Elena could hear the final blow. "I know about the cliffs, Thomas," Sebastian whispered, his voice a dangerous hiss. "I know about the child. And I know you threatened her that afternoon. You didn't push Isabel, but you might as well have." Thomas began to shake violently, the air leaving his lungs. "You have two choices," Sebastian announced to the room. "Debtor's prison awaits you at dawn, where you will rot. Or you board the packet boat to Calais tonight and never set foot on these shores again." Thomas didn't hesitate. He turned and fled the ballroom, a broken man, with Clementine shrieking insults at his retreating back. The vengeance was complete. The silence in the room was heavy, but Sebastian broke it by turning to Elena and offering his hand. "Shall we dance, my dear?" As the orchestra struck up a waltz, Elena looked up at her husband. The harsh lines of the Ice King had softened. The terrifying intensity of the last week had faded, replaced by a weary but genuine warmth. "Is it over?" she whispered, as he spun her. "Yes," Sebastian murmured, pulling her closer than propriety allowed. "It is finally over. You saved me, Elena. I was drowning in this house, chained to a ghost. You broke the chains." Elena smiled, tears prickling her eyes. "I think, Your Grace, we saved each other." As the music swelled, the Coldest Duke in England smiled, a real, genuine smile, at the woman who had crashed into his life and refused to let him freeze. The past was buried. Their future had just begun. What a journey! From a humiliating public rejection to finding strength in the arms of the Ice King, Elena and Sebastian's story proves that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we are meant to be. They faced scandal, blackmail, and a villainous ex-lover, proving that true power comes from trust and partnership. If your heart was racing during that final ballroom confrontation, or if you shed a tear when Sebastian finally broke down in the library, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new historical romance saga. And tell me in the comments, do you think Sebastian will ever truly learn to love again? Until next time, keep dreaming.